check it
But
out.
that's actually something I wanted to ask you, like, because obviously Dream Theater, you have obviously big heavy guitars from John, and obviously there's vocals, there's obviously drums and bass too. So how do you think about fitting your parts in? Because with the keyboard, the synth, whatever you are putting to the song, it's easy to maybe get stuck in the same octave as whoever, you know. So how do you
Great.
try to
Yeah, especially
structure the
yeah.
parts?
That's a that's always a good question, a good thing for people to think about when they're making music is how do you separate the parts? How do you
Hmm.
give space? First of all, John Petrucci's guitar is as big as a house. It's a huge sound, and he often double tracks it, which means it's tremendous. So you think from that perspective that there's not that much space left, right?
Hmm.
But there's drums and there's bass and there's vocals and there's keyboards. But honestly, we've gotten over the years, I think we've gotten better and better at making that space. I mean, I think there's things he does with his guitars, like maybe he's not, I'm not quite sure, but I'll just say that there are things that the engineer does to make the guitars sound great with consideration of the mix. So yes, it still is really big, but there's going to be keyboard parts as well. But we've gotten really good at finding things that really work with the guitar. Like one approach that I'll take is I have a whole bank of patches that I've created over the years that work really well with the guitar. Like if I'm doubling the guitar, they're like
Right.
heavy sounds and they double the guitar, but they're not sounds where you go, oh, that's the keyboardist. You wouldn't even necessarily know. It's a very ego free kind of zone for me because I'm playing a sound that adds dimension to the guitar. Like this is one sound that almost has a little bit of notoriety. It's called the snarling pig that people talk about. You can kind of hear it in Dream Theater songs. It has a sound. It's a
Right.
flangey sound that almost like if you imagine the guitar is kind of like a straight line, the snarling pig is kind of moving around it and creating this cool character to it. And
Right.
so I have a bunch of things like that that work. So that's one approach because we do a lot of unison lines and, everybody wants to play and we want to sound a little bit unique when we do it.
Hmm.
Um, but then there's also a lot of like, big, majestic, epic stuff that happens in Dream Theater. Maybe the strings and voices and
Hmm.
French horns and all that stuff. And to do that, the way that I go about orchestrating, and this is something I learned also through the years, is most keyboard players are playing like that. They're just playing their big chord and it's just there, and that's what they do. But I've had to take a more orchestrational approach to my Dream Theater orchestrations, where I will literally record like the melody line of the strings with one sound that's almost like I'll use like a string virtual instrument that's, all the violins playing a beautiful like a legato kind of tone. And I'll use that to express the melody. And then I'll use a different sound to express the high part of the strings, knowing that the melody is highlighted with another,
Hmm. Hmm.
different library. And then if I feel like I want to add some boom, boom, low stuff as well, I'll put that on another track. And that way the mixer has the flexibility to really work with that. He might say, you know what, that's just too much, or I want it to be
Hmm.
this way.
Hmm.
So by doing that, we give the flexibility, and things all often, they always end up sounding better that way. Especially this
Right.
trick of offering the melody line, even if it's a chord as a separate line, if it's important that it comes through. Because there's no way that, I mean, you do audio engineering, and if you put up a whole keyboard chord, it's very different than if you can take out the top of it and just have that be heard.
Yeah.
So yeah, so things like that are really important, and then being very conscious of effects as well. You always hear engineers say, "Can you give me a little less reverb or something like that?" Or there's that, and and another part of it is that a lot of times when I'm doing like chordal things, like even pads or what I call my progressive kind of patches, I'll EQ them so that they don't have a lot of sound. Like a lot of keyboard sounds just have a lot of low end in them because they're programmed to be, enjoyed just by playing them. So when you go into a music store, you're playing through the patches. You want to have each sound have body and depth. But when you're playing in a band where the guitar player is like, sound,
Yeah,
you don't
exactly.
need to have that as part of your keyboard sound. It's just pushing the lows too much.
Hmm.
So very often, even if it's a mellow pad or a progressive sounding keyboard patch, I will EQ it so that I get rid of some of the low energy and just keep the part that needs to come through and maybe even tweak it a little bit in, 2 to 5K and just give it a little,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Most
Makes
rock
sense.
musicians don't hear very well in that frequency anyway, so you give a little push and then everybody's happy.